Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's webinar and thanks for tuning in. My name is Friederike Reder and my guest today is Professor Winfried Ruigrok. Winfried is Professor of International Management at the University of St.Gallen and Dean at the Executive School. Today's topic is the top management agenda to executive development. Before we dive right into it, I would like to mention just two things. First of all, of course, you're welcome to ask your question, to type in your question anytime during the webinar, and we'll happily discuss these with you afterwards. Also, of course, we'll send you the slides and the link to the recording after the webinar. That means in the next 2 to 3 days. So welcome, Winfried. Thanks for taking the time. It's a pleasure to have you here. Winfried has just published this week the St. Gallen Executive Education Report. I'm eager to hear what you found out. I wish you lots of fun and you an insightful lunch break. So I'll start the presentation for you now.
Excellent. Thank you, Friederike. While Friederike is setting us up, at some point you should see the presentation coming on your screen. And I think you can decide how, whether you rather want to see the presentation or want to see the image. And what we've done over the last 6 years is to look at how are companies organizing the development of executive learning and development. Why are we doing this? Before I explain what it is exactly we did, why are we doing this? Well, while I'm trying to get the presentation to move here, and maybe Friederike, you can help me. We have done this because when we look at the environment, what is happening, what is changing? We're seeing increasing competition. We're seeing digitization. We're seeing all kinds of new business models emerging. And the question really is, how can top executives do the top job well? Because as the Financial Times recently stated, even smart people can do badly in top executive positions. So really, are firms doing enough? Are they doing a good enough job when it comes to developing the next generation of executives? In view of increasing scrutiny by investors, but also by the wider public, by NGOs, by media, by governments, what is it that companies are doing and are they doing enough? Okay. What we did is we sent out a survey and we received about 300 usable responses from companies all around the world, although the focus was on companies based in the German-speaking area. And you can look at the screen, you can see some well-known companies ranging from Nestle and Hilti to BBC, General Electric, some major Swiss financial players, but also some smaller companies. And we've received actually a very nice distribution of both larger and of smaller companies, and also from a range of industries. This is interesting because it helped us to look at two things here. On the first hand, we wanted to understand executive learning and development. In German, you might say Führungskräfteentwicklung. Really, the development of tomorrow's top leader in the organization. And in particular, we're interested in what is it that these companies are doing effectively, and what particularly is the role of the current CEO and the current top management team, Vorstand, Geschäftsleitung in German. And we found in this report that actually the effectiveness of executive learning and development depends on the involvement of the top management team. And that's what I will be talking about in this report. First, we asked companies questions: how satisfied are you? How effective is your executive L&D? And we found that, unfortunately, companies are rather dissatisfied with the state of executive learning and development in their organization. Look at this number. 84% of companies indicate that they're not doing enough, they themselves. So it's not about others, no, it's about people, respondents who say, we are not doing enough when it comes to developing the next generation of top executives in our organization. Now that is a stunning figure. Unfortunately, it is not surprising because in the previous 2 rounds of this current report, the report, which by the way, I'm going to show you very briefly, is available also online. It's available for free download online, and you will find in the email that you will receive from us. We found in earlier editions of this report very similar percentages, i.e. companies really are facing a challenge when it comes to organizing their executive learning and development adequately. And because we've established that in the past, in this report we wanted to understand what is it that these companies should do better. Okay, what is it we looked at? We looked at, in essence, 4 kinds of questions. We asked respondents 4 questions, and they're stated here. So we regard executive L&D in our organization as a front-running organizational function. We exploit the full potential of executive L&D. We use L&D in order to support our primary business goals, and we, in our company, organize or secure executive support. And we identified companies that either agreed or disagreed, and we identified 3 major groups. So one first group is a group of what we call novices. These are companies that have stated no to each of those 4 questions. So in essence, these are companies saying, no, we're not doing a good enough job. Then we identified some companies where that tick 1 or maximally 2 of those criteria, and a third group of what we call executive L&D champions that ticked 3 or 4 of these boxes. And when we then analyze these 3 major groups, we find very interesting differences that we'll explain in the next. However, first, when we look over time, how have these groups developed? And we can see that the group of novices is still by far the biggest group. So by far the biggest percentage of respondents in our current, but also in previous surveys, have indicated, no, we're not doing enough. We're not satisfied with what we're doing. The group of challengers, the group that ticks 1 or 2 questions as yes, I agree, has been increasing, but is still considerably smaller. And the group of champions, the group that ticks 3 or 4 of these 4 questions, has only grown very, very gradually. So it's a very small group, 1 in 6 companies, or 1 in 6 respondents that argue in our organization we have, we meet those criteria when it comes to executive L&D. And so we asked ourselves, what are these companies doing differently? But before we did that, we asked ourselves the question, does it matter? Because, hey, maybe you tick a couple of boxes, so what? Well, actually, it would appear to matter. We've designed the question in such a way that we weren't leading the questions to give, or the respondents to give a certain answer. What we found is that companies that tick 3 or 4 out of those boxes are much more likely to claim that they outperform their competitors, that they're amongst the top 10% performers within their industry. Look at this graph. You can see how that compares with a group of challengers and novices. It doesn't really seem to matter to be able to make some progress. No, it only matters to make significant progress. Okay, the researcher in me here says, well, Winfried, be a bit cautious. I mean, you didn't use actually objective outside data for this. This is an assessment. And for those of you who are researchers, common method bias is what we would use here. And I would say absolutely agree with. However, I mean, this is a pretty stunning result, and it indicates this is something worth looking into in the future. So if we agree that it seems, at least as a plausible hypothesis, likely that companies that are champions are on average performing much better, how are they internally in their own organizations dealing with obstacles? How are they organizing their processes? And we've identified a series of obstacles and processes. And interestingly, some of these obstacles, some of these processes are the same for all companies. So when it comes to talent is rare. Well, doesn't matter whether you're small or large, doesn't matter whether you're a champion or not a champion, doesn't matter what industry you're in. Talent is a challenge in pretty much every industry. However, there's a few areas where champions appear to make a difference. Look at this graph, and you can see that on the right-hand side, champions tend to do much better. This gap, that's what the gap indicates, tend to do much better when it comes to establishing an overarching learning architecture. Mind you, you still see 24% even of champions find it difficult and see this as a real obstacle. However, they appear to have made much more progress than the other two groups of companies in establishing a learning architecture. The same, of course, with resources. Yes, resources are always limited, but they found a way better to deal with this. Or they may just simply be working in a company that says, okay, executive L&D is important to us, and as a result, we need to allocate resources to that important function. Finally, it appears that champions, executive L&D champions, are better able to coordinate across divisions, across business units in the organization, and as such, are better able to achieve executive L&D goals, irrespective of the unit where people are working. So these are three important characteristics because they all refer to, let's say, the organizational logic, the fact that champions do some things differently from novices and from challengers. What do they do differently? Well, the key thing they do differently is that top management plays an important role where it matters. And I underline where it matters. So when it comes to deciding on budgets, when it comes to setting standards, executive L&D standards, when it comes to new initiatives, you can see that with champions, this is almost always the realm or the domain of top management, as opposed to novices and challengers, where there are different foci in the organization where either decisions are being made or budget are being decided. And that really indicates at executive L&D champions, top management understands that executive L&D is important. And therefore, top management needs to make such decisions. It is not something that, okay, occasionally we make decisions as the top management of the organization, occasionally we leave it to HR, and occasionally we leave it to individual business units. No, there's much more of a coordination. There's much more of a strategy at work. So C-level plays a more important role. And that really is also clear from the following slide. We ask questions such as, do we derive our executive L&D from our corporate strategy? And almost all companies, more than 9 in 10, which is really a stunning figure, indicate that, I mean, we have got strategy, corporate strategy in place, and executive L&D strategy really is derived from our corporate strategy. That's, of course, how it should be. I know it's not easy, but that's how it should be, i.e. there's a deliberate attempt to say, okay, these are objectives we will try to achieve, and this leads to these and these developmental objectives for the very top of our organization. Now, you may sit there thinking, okay, this means that top management is involved. I mean, do we talk about top-down organization? Are these highly centralized organizations? And interestingly, not necessarily. In fact, probably not, because when you look on the left-hand side, this dark green bar indicates that top management at champions is much more involved when it comes to setting the frameworks and giving the direction, i.e., at a strategic level. But interestingly, when it then comes to implementation, champions are more likely to say, okay, this is the framework, this is the direction we want to go. Now you, the L&D professionals, the HR department, which have the professional knowledge, which have the expertise when it comes to rolling out the programs, you have more degrees of freedom. And actually, when you think of this makes a lot of sense. If you know where you want to go, if the direction is clear, then you can give clear instructions, and they can give degrees of freedom to the teams implementing those ideas. Whereas if you do not know exactly where you want to go, which appears to be much more the case with novices and challengers, then you constantly want to make sure you keep some kind of control over key processes. So on the right-hand side, when you look at the dark green bullet, you can see that champions, executive L&D champions, actually give more freedom to people. So it's actually much clearer to L&D professionals in such an organization to know where the organization is going and hence what their role is going to be. We had a final set of questions that we asked, because clearly something is changing when it comes to, well, the whole environment, the whole business world around us, but also when it comes to how executives are being developed. And that is a whole new role of technologies. Clearly, as a business school, we find that interesting. We are confronted with things such as MOOCs, massive open online courses. But we wanted to know, do companies in their internal development, in their executive L&D, make use of such technologies? And on the left-hand side, you can see on the one hand that this is only moving ahead slowly. You can see that most companies still make a massive use of traditional formats, classroom settings, coaching, and so on. This is still by far the dominant mode being used. However, the bottom side of the left-hand part, you can see that new technology-based formats are increasing. And although they may not appear so small, from 19 to 24%, that actually is an increase of 28%. I mean, it's a rounding issue here with 28% of increase. So actually, technology-based formats are on the rise. And we asked companies how many such formats. We gave a whole list of possible formats that we identified. How many of these formats are you using? And as you can see, a growing percentage of companies indicate that they are using at least one, in some cases even two or more. So there is an increase when it comes to using technology-based formats, but as the title of the slide indicates, it is a steady, it is a, if you wish, an evolution instead of a revolution. No disruption yet, but over time this will certainly have the look like a disruption. And the key question then is, okay, are there things that executive L&D champions are doing differently from the other groups of companies? And the answer is, well, yes and no. Many companies are experimenting with new forms, technology-based formats. But as you can see on this slide, we have identified a series of barriers to using technology-based formats in executive L&D. And again, you can find it's a consistent story that companies where top management teams are much more involved are better able to deal with barriers. So barriers exist for all of us. Every company faces the challenge that people who are to move to become heads of divisions are to move into the top management team, maybe of a generation that are not as keen to use technology-based formats as compared with people who are 30 or 35 years old. But that's something which is generic. Top executive L&D champions appear to be better able to deal with such barriers. So barriers when it comes to integrating insights from different parts of the organization, making sure you've got the right infrastructure in place, and indeed helping executives to overcome their hesitation, their reluctance. So again, it appears that champions are doing something better here. We haven't identified specific performance advantages of this here. This is all still very much crystallizing. This is something which is emerging, but the story is clear. Even when it comes to technology-based formats, executive L&D champions appear to be in the driver's seat. So, if you, if this was too much information, again, the report is there, and I'll show you a slide in a minute where you can download it. But there's three things really that I'm saying. First, unfortunately, many firms today are not effective when it comes to executive L&D. This is a phenomenon we've seen in the past, and it's a phenomenon, unfortunately, still valid today. Therefore, in this report, secondly, we try to identify those companies that are more satisfied. Is there something they're doing differently? Need to take a sip of water here. And the answer is yes. Those companies that are better able to overcome, that are more satisfied with the state of executive learning development in their organization, are doing a series of things differently. And the key differentiating factor is top management involvement. Third, technologies matter. New technology-based formats matter when it comes to executive L&D. However, they do not define effective executive L&D. You can be effective with executive L&D without relying heavily on technology-based formats. At the same time, they are the future. And with that, I come to the end of my general talk. However, not without showing you first where to download the report. In your email, you will be able to, you'll get this link as well. And as I said, this link is freely available. You don't have to sign up anything. It's immediately downloadable. Secondly, I want to state that this report is very much also the result of my colleague Geir Goodman, who ran the whole survey with me and did most of the analysis. In fact, to be honest, he did much of the reading, most of the reading. So Geir, you're listening. Thank you very much. And I think now I hope you have some thoughts, some questions, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Well, thank you, Winfried. That was very interesting. So I'll stop the presentation.
We might still need it for questions.
Yes, we may go back to the presentation later. So a few questions are there already. Feel free to send us more questions because we have a bit of time to discuss these. First two really focusing on technology. You report more use of digital formats, but don't see it as disruptive. Can you give examples to what you would consider a disruptive use of learning technology?
Yeah. Well, a good example would be a use of MOOCs, right? In principle, I mean, the whole idea when MOOCs came up, massive online open courses, was, okay, these courses are going to be available, at least the content is going to come available for free. Why would we send our executives or future executives to expensive courses, to in-house training, while this knowledge is available? Now, in principle, I mean, if this format was successful, this could revolutionize the whole L&D, including executive L&D world. Of course, the reason why we're not seeing that disruption yet is that the misunderstanding is that this all revolves around knowledge. And yes, knowledge is important. Without knowledge, you will not succeed. But what you need is much more than just knowledge. There's at least two more things that are required. On the one hand, you need a set of personal skills that you need to train. And a lot of our programs, for instance, but I talk for many top business schools today, do not just focus on knowledge. They very much focus on all kinds of coaching and personal development formats at all levels, starting at the MBA all the way to our advanced management programs, all the way to in-house programs. And secondly, there's a networking component. We people are social beings. It is something entirely different to do a course online on your own, as opposed to meeting people from the organization, from within, and talk and exchange opinions and also develop trust. So that's why I'm saying, I mean, but in principle, the MOOC could be a revolutionizing. We're not seeing it yet, but then again, we don't know the direction this could go. This is just one such example.
Well, thanks. One more focusing on technology. Did you look more closely into which specific tech-based formats firms use?
Yeah, so, I mean, as an example, I mean, we asked detailed questions about specific formats that companies are using. Another example, based on what I just mentioned, is a thing called SPOCs, which is which are private, which small and private, i.e. within a company formats. we looked at a whole series of questions, and we found that most companies, when it comes to technology, either refer to MOOCs or to SPOCs. Other types of formats are still much rarer, right? So keeping in mind that many companies are not using these formats excessively yet, and within those formats, MOOCs and SPOCs are the most often used.
Well, thanks. Did you look more closely on coaching and its role within L&D?
Not so much in this particular project. I mentioned coaching earlier, and that's something that we did in earlier versions. We did look at coaching in the sense, I mean, is this a format you are using? And do you believe it is an important and also an effective method? And the answer is yes. Many companies are heavily using coaching. It is not declining, it is increasing. And typically people feel that coaching is useful, is effective. Of course, we do not know exactly what companies then are doing, how much time they're spending, the quality of coaches that they're using. Of course, these are details we could not ask in the interview or in the survey. But yes, we did look at that as well.
Okay. Winfried, did you find any differences between smaller versus larger firms and how effectively they organize their executive L&D, or about the role of the top management?
Yeah, maybe that's actually, I have a slide on that. I don't know if you find it possible to go back to the presentation. Because we did look at that, and there's I think the presentation now coming back up. Let's see if I can. Yeah, no, that's all. So here we have an overview. So one of the things you always do in reports like this is you look at, is there any bias? Are there some industries or some types of companies that are more likely to do better? So first of all, we see that I mean, both very large and small companies are represented in this survey. So what we're saying here does not just hold for large companies. And in fact, and the same, by the way, for industries, we found that all industries are well represented. You can see a higher percentage for industrial, but then that also reflects the industrial structure of, in particular, companies in the German-speaking area, where industrial-based companies are still more prominent than maybe in other countries. So we found, and that was the interesting thing, everything that I said, I didn't want to bother you with statistical tests and everything, but everything I said is based on statistical tests and on significant differences. And we always tested, okay, to what extent is this driven, for instance, by industry or by firm size? And the answer is no. So you can find executive L&D champions also at small companies, not just at large companies. So people may think, oh, this is something only large companies can afford. No. We've come across in our survey some innovative small companies that are able to do exactly the same, that is, have top management team involvement. So in that sense, what I've presented here has a generic finding across size and across industries.
Very nice. While we're waiting maybe for one or two more questions, I have one. Okay. Do you have any insights about the role business schools play? Can we help companies become L&D champions, or how does the relationship with business schools affect the quality of the L&D?
Yeah. Well, I think business schools can play a role in two ways. First, in doing exactly the sort of work we're doing here. Because one key reason why we produced this report is that there is no independent research on executive L&D. There have been some consultant reports that have been produced on executive L&D, but they have not used sort of academic standards in how you conduct such a survey. Okay, that may not always be as important for the audience, but in what we do is we actually all this research is based on ANOVA regression type analyses, and that means that the results that we present here are more robust. Sometimes you may see a difference in a report, but you don't know if any of these are really significant. Okay, that's point one. And point two, yes, business schools, of course, are keen to learn about developments in organizations. And one of the things we're seeing is that increasingly there's a partnership evolving, because we talked about technology-based formats. Well, if there's one thing that we see is that companies often come to business schools asking us, can you help us? So they may come with a lot of requests, a lot of demands, and they probably do so because they want to learn. They want to learn from us. They want to learn from our experience, also in other programs, also in our undergraduate programs. So there's very much a partnership evolving. Companies often know we can't master that revolution to technology-based formats ourselves. We have to find partners. And you can do that with maybe technology partners, but then you don't have the expertise of how to set up programs adequately. Because that's another thing we found actually already in an earlier program. Just setting up the technology-based formats per se doesn't make the difference. So don't think, okay, now I will roll out a nice technology platform and it's all going to be hunky-dory. No, it's not going to be that easy. You actually need to fit in your technology-based solution into your overall architecture, into your solution. I think there, business schools, certainly schools, okay, for my pitch, St. Gallen, I mean, like us, I mean, we very much try to have a deep customizing approach, i.e. we take customers' demands when it comes to customizing custom programs as the starting point, and we try to develop solutions based on those demands. And so yes, I sincerely believe that business schools can play an important role in that transition.
Thanks. So there's one question that's sort of ideal as a last question. If you had to decide, what would you see as the single most effective executive development action to recommend, in-house versus external?
It's always difficult to come up with one thing, because I mean that suggests there is a silver bullet.
You only had so much money. Where would you invest?
Well, what I would invest in is to make sure that top management is involved with these key criteria identified earlier, i.e. is involved in setting the framework, is involved in setting the guidelines. So invest your money first in making sure that your corporate L&D strategy follows from your overall corporate strategy. Now that may sound counterintuitive, because you may be thinking, yeah, maybe I should buy a nice platform, or I should invest in a kind of new technology. I mean, that is only step two. Step one is get your strategy in order overall, but then particularly also when it comes to L&D. And once you've got that organized, you can identify, okay, these are these programs, this is my architecture, here is how new technologies are likely to fit in. So no quick fix. But when you've got that in place, you will also have a much more informed discussion, both internally as well as externally, with business schools or other providers or any kinds of executive L&D services, to indicate, okay, this is what we want, here's where we want to go, and it makes it easier for your partner. For us, it is easier if we know, if a client understands these are our objectives, here's where we want to go, this is the transformation we want to achieve. Can we co-design a program that will meet those objectives? We can be much more focused, and we can be much more successful with our program.
Well, I think that was it with the questions. Do you have any closing remarks, Winfried?
No,
I would like to say.
I want to thank all respondents. I hope some of the people participating in the webinar are also respondents in the survey. I want to thank you for your support. I want to thank our partners that have been cooperating with us. We've had a series of partners in Switzerland, in Germany, in Austria. We've worked with partners in the Netherlands. We've worked with Unicon, a university consortium of executive education providers. So in Switzerland, ZKP has been very supportive. I want to thank all our partners for their support in rolling out the survey. We will share the findings also with our partners. So you'll be able to read a lot of more detailed analyses on the website. So the website I showed you earlier will not, at the moment, only indicates the current report and previous reports plus publicity at the time, we will also make sure that all the sort of next steps in terms of publicity will be on there. And we will there, for instance, maybe look a bit more in detail when it comes to technology-based formats or other aspects. I hope you'll find the report interesting. Do please share your ideas, your feedback. If you think, okay, something you did not look at or something which I believe is more important, do let us know. We are planning another edition of this report in about 2 years' time, which means we will start with the preparation of the survey already in half a year, 2 years' time. That's the cycles you're working with. And all inputs are extremely welcome. So thank you to our partners, thank you to our respondents, and looking forward to your feedback. And thank you for the possibility to share my views and our insights with the audience.
Well, thank you, Winfried. Thanks for taking the time. Thanks to you, dear viewers. And yeah, as I said, of course, we'll send you the link to the slides and also the report in the follow-up email. Just give us 2 to 3 days and yeah, look in your inbox. So have a nice afternoon.
Thank you. En goede middag.